My friend got caught lying on his resume. So I was chatting to a friend the other day who does contract jobs in tech and earns mega bucks. And also a software dev myself. I was wondering how he was continually landing all these high-profile jobs. And this is what he told me. He just buffs out his resume to give himself more years of experience doing cooler things and throws in a fancy company or two. He's not a bad programmer in the first place, but he is cautious not to overstep his ability, and so he picks jobs where they pay for quality, not complexity. Therefore, he can always get the stuff done, i.e., it's within his scope. And he has the best work-life balance I've ever seen. Naturally, I asked him if he's been caught, and he said he has in the interview phase once or twice, never during a contract, and when he has been caught it doesn't matter cause someone else hires him in a heartbeat. Also, you guessed it, his referees are fake, and he said if he ever got fired he'd just lie it out of his resume, lol. So now he just earns loads, has lots of time off between contracts, and when he feels like something new he just sends out a few applications and that's it. And I must admit I was a bit jealous. The Discord for our subreddit can be found here, https://discord.gg/jjndbkvgc6. Feel free to join us for a more real-time level of discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit, message, compose, to =r, recruiting hell, if you have any questions or concerns. I let my friends use my company to fill holes in their work history and provide good references based on projects that I know they can do. Lol. See? This is where it's at. We all need to be more helpful to one another. Breaks in work history are probably the dumbest thing to judge someone on. Mainly just a US thing. I moved to Europe and people judge you based on how you treat them, not your net worth or annual income. It's just one of the things I notice about the US. One of the first things that comes up in a new conversation with a stranger is, "What's your job?" They use your response to gauge how to treat you, as if you're either worth more or less than each other. Here in Norway, when I meet someone new, we immediately jump to hobbies or travel exploits, cultural stuff. It's completely normal to work for a few years, then to take a long vacation to visit the world and enrich yourself. Not to mention we get about 4 to 5 weeks off of vacation and sick leave. We score pretty high on overall happiness, compared to the miserable lives of the average US worker. Deleted. Well, I'd say there are some good things in the US, as long as they don't get in the way of making a buck. We're number one, sarcasm. The US has its problems, but the world economy is literally based on the US dollar. We can sway the entire worldwide stock market based on national issues. Are we the best? Questionable. Does the US have the most influence on the rest of the world? Absolutely. I wouldn't say US is the best country in the world, but calling it a shithole tells me you have not been to very many other countries. I'd agree. I've been to plenty of European first world countries for extended periods of time, and while some aspects are very appealing, I'd still prefer to live in the US. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like a lot of people just echo the same sentiments and haven't actually experienced it for themselves, and so it only sounds better. That said, someone else's preferences are not my own, and that's okay. We are constantly struggling to keep a functioning democracy, due to an absurdly corrupt political justice system, many of which are systematically trying to destroy the rights and lives of anyone they don't agree with. Yes, we are a shithole country. Other places might have it worse. We can all collectively be shitholes together. It's not a contest. Much to the disagreement from many of those in the US. But it's the only place on earth poor assholes can become rich assholes, and that's pretty special. The American dream is a lie. Nah, the people saying the US is the best are many, many Americans. Not just rich assholes. What a stupid thing for you to say. Other people saying it are people all over the world struggling with actual shithole countries and aspiring to get here. Including a lot of Europeans. Far more Europeans migrate to the US than vice versa. It is much fairer to flip your little turd of a comment on you. Really, the only people saying the US is a shithole country are the Reddit left-wing assholes who aren't doing great and want to blame others for it. Yeah, that's much closer to accurate. Sure, Jan. Europe is a big place with varied cultures, but in my experience it is a far more classist society than the US. Sure, They may not judge you by your net worth or job because they've already judged you by your accent and upbringing. And yes, the hobbies and cultural stuff are usually a great insight into your class, which is why it's a topic. I go sailing on my J11 in my free time and play polo at my local club team. I used to have a Lipizzaner when I was younger but had to forego him when I went to uni abroad. What about you? RC cars? Interesting. Face with rolling eyes. Apologies for the late reply. Been attending to the horses to make sure they're ready for the hunt and making sure the staff are preparing the cottage for our weekend to attend the regatta. Shame about the Lipizzaner. J11 a nice little craft, isn't she? Oh, we judge people in the US by accent as well lol. Exactly, they made the call on your class the second they took one look at you. Race, clothes, accessories, location, entourage. Then made the call to shit on you, or suck up to you in about 1/4 of a second. As if there are no classes in the US. It is no perfect here, but at least in Europe we can afford healthcare and higher education. Of course, pretty much every culture has its positives and negatives. It would be boring if it were otherwise. No argument, got med bills piled up, but my town of 60K has more MRI machines than the second largest town in England. My dad got a CAT scan within 20 minutes of getting to the ER because the hospital has 2 of them. That scan saved his life 5 years ago. My wife was born at 24 weeks, she was in the hospital for 6 months. Total bills exceeded $1 million US in the 80s. There wasn't even a question of hospice, it was balls to the walls by the whole team for months. Lots of shit to talk her. But 2 of the people I care most about in the world would have died in EU healthcare. Looked it up back in the day, and CAT scan isn't even an option for patients presenting like my dad did in the UK. Just treat like a heart attack, the aortic dissection is such a low chance it's not worth the cost of checking. Fair enough. But UK left the EU. As a Belgian I never heard of problems with not getting a needed scan, CAT or other types. In the US we literally pay for most of the advancements in modern medicine. That also means we have access to the most expensive technology advances and pay for it straight up. Every other country should be thanking us for subsidizing medical research out of our pockets. Sometimes it's just far enough advanced that it saves some extra lives, whereas that wouldn't be possible in most countries. Do you think that the EU is like third world? This tall tale of the US being the best country in the world has already long been discredited. If I look at my own country, to the achievements of the university hospitals of Louvain, it is one of the best of the world, and certainly not paid by US tax dollars. It is harder to get a job in Europe than in US. They can't fire you easily so they can't take the risk. Depends on which country we're talking about. Most EU countries go with a trial period where they can fire you on short notice. The main indication of how hard it is to get a job is by looking at the unemployment rate. Currently, the US is at 4.3% and Denmark is at 2.9%, and as a Dane who used to work in the recruiting business, it really is easy to get a job if you work hard and consistently show up on time. It's really easy to get a job if you're a Dane is what you mean to say. Comparing unemployment rates doesn't account for much if you don't account for demographics. Well, yes, hard to get a job anywhere if you don't have a work permit. Though assuming you do have that, the language is the only other real barrier I can think of. But there are only few countries where this is less of an issue, since nearly all Danes speak English. America's a big place with varied cultures. In the US we are taught our identity is our job from a young age. And this thought led to an epiphany that I am struggling to type out so won't. I thank you for the seed of that thought. This is a thing that has bothered me for a while now. I mostly define myself by what I do for work, and even in my dating profile. If this profile seems boring to you, that's because it has stood its test for proof. I don't have any real hobbies. I play computer games and enjoy wrenching on things, but that's it. Otherwise I go to work. I was raised on being able to stand on my own 2 feet and busting my ass to afford to live. What really bothers me? The fact that nothing interests me. Outside of dicking around on my PC with my friends or wrenching on motors or what have you. Nothing grabs at me. Hell, I have been bored at the house and just gone in to work for a few hours. It makes me feel as though something is fundamentally broken inside me. Is this really all I am? A guy who works at a place. I have tried to branch into different hobbies but none have stuck. Maybe work is my hobby? I enjoy what I do very much but surely there should be something more. It's very frustrating to try and solve the question of who you are. You like PC games and wrenching on things, huh? You know what that says to me? Games are essentially stories, whether it be that expertly crafted RPG or that glorious moment with your friends in a shooter. It's about experiencing a story, whether immersing yourself in one being told or crafting your own. It doesn't matter if it's a novel, a movie or a series, stories are stories, and they are extremely meaningful. It's all about what you take from the story that matters. As far as wrenching, there's an absolute satisfaction in being able to fix things. Especially with vehicles, there's an appreciation for the engineering and craft that went into its construction. There are many people who see vehicles as simply a tool, a mode of getting to one place or another. While they're not wrong, there's also a beauty to its design, and being able to maintain that vehicle makes you a part that. It's easy to fall into the mode of thinking you are your job. In reality, your job is a means to an end. It allows you the freedom to pursue the other aspects of your life that bring you enjoyment. If you can also find enjoyment or satisfaction from your job, all the better. In the US, if you're working class, then chances are video games are your only way to actually experience anything. It's sad. I remember being working class poor in the US. Now I only work 4 days a week and get to go out and experience adventures IRL. Sure beats being poor and living life in front of a computer screen. As an American, I've learned to gauge the "what's your job?" question. Some people are just honestly curious, and I'll tell them I get to drive a forklift and bust open boxes and I love it. Others want to know how important I am and I give the whole, designed to be over anyone outside the industry's head, spiel about X-ray fluorescence, traceability, and monitoring ingress to egress. Either way, I'd much rather talk about hiking or flying RC toys. American here who genuinely just wants to know more about a person. What do you do? Is a common intro to a conversation because some people are passionate about their lifestyle and are happy to talk about it for 20 minutes. It's not about how much you get paid or how educated you are. I legitimately want to hear your passions and how you identify yourself. Granted, I interview people for a living and that carries over into my personal life. Generally speaking though, people like it when you are interested in finding out more about them. That sounds wonderful, loudly crying. It is wonderful. I get to live like my boomer parents did. I own my own house for one. Plus all my recreational equipment and hobbies. Instead of deciding whether or not to have dinner to save money, I get to decide if I want to buy a dirt bike or another side by side. It's really another plane of existence and thought. I'm not confined to the capitalist rat race anymore, smiley face. Yeah, that's one of my worst fears, is like being trapped and not being able to do what I want to or not have access to the things that makes life worth living for me, and like healthcare. Owning a house in this day and age seems harder and harder. I hope things start getting better for everyone and the wealth disparity like chills the fuck out, but IDK. Again, glad you're in a good situation and thanks for sharing. I'm a def look into this when I look into moving out in the next couple years. It's fucking pathetic how something as basic as home ownership is so unattainable in the US. What's even more pathetic is the losers who hop on here to defend the high cost of home ownership. I leave the US and automatically walk into my own home. That's how easy it is literally anywhere other than America. It's not just getting harder and harder to own a home in the US, it's impossible unless you earn way over 6 figures. Even in the shithole red states. Wealth disparity isn't going anywhere. So long as capitalism reigns in the US. That's the great thing about capitalism, it favors consolidated generational wealth and stifles upwards mobility. Yeah, I'm with you, mate. This shit sucks ass. That sounds amazing. I've stopped answering, "What do you do?" with what I do for work because it's low level and boring AF. Instead I answer with artist, hiker, comic book author, drone pilot, gunslinger, MMA fighter, and horseback adventurer. Hopefully they are intrigued enough by one of these things, I am female, to let the topic of work and earnings, postal code location and anything else related to outward status go. Interesting. Anytime I lead with my hobbies and activities, I always get followed up by what I do for a living. Sad face usually leads to a boring conversation with another boring person. Here I actually get to talk to people and learn things that I can do myself, like climbing mountains, biking, hiking, camping, etc. I think you'd really like it here. One of my cousins just packed up all her stuff and moved to Colombia. I'm seriously jealous and have been thinking of finding that perfect place to leave the US for. Norway is definitely on the list of places I'm looking. Thank you. Smiley face. I'd stay away from South America. Come up here to Norway. Get a work visa and try it out for a couple years. I guarantee you'll want to stay. There's really nothing America can offer that you can't get here. Except for Disneyland, which is just a plane hop away from Paris. People are nice here too. And I emphasize that, because most Americans are entitled assholes. I always responded to, "What do you do for a living?" with, as little as possible. Definitely got some looks from the professional office types. Lol. Your CEO material, buddy, winking face. I'd probably respond the same, but I live in a country where occupation really isn't pertinent to everyday conversation. Can confirm as a working cheesecake, I'm miserable. In Latin America and Asia those work gaps are also judged. I stopped saying my gaps were to take care of both of my dying parents and I just made up freelance work, the difference it made. What do you do? Is the most boring, insipid question people ask here in the US. I never took it as a judgment thing though. Many Americans are just so boring and vacuous that a lot of people don't have anything else to talk about. It's very frustrating for those of us that don't make work our entire identity. It's funny. Go outside the US and we have a lot more to talk about. We're not all obsessed with the capitalist rat race to earn crumbs. It's hard explaining this to my former American friends that we actually have lives here, instead of grinding day after day just to afford to live. Why in the world do you think, "What do you do?" is boring or insipid? Why in the world? Because with very few job exceptions, you work to live and do the things you actually want to do. If the first question someone asks is, "What do you do?" they inevitably can't talk about much else in my experience. Maybe sports. As Op already explained, it's only the norm in hyper-capitalistic societies to drone on about work to a person you just met. It only takes the slightest bit of effort to take an interest in literally anything besides jobs. It's so boring. I work 36 hours a week, have free health insurance, dental insurance, 5 weeks of paid vacation, and earn nearly 2x the amount I made in the US as a nurse. My work is just something I do 4 days a week. It pays for all my hobbies and my living expenses. I don't have to worry about my mortgage, it's already paid for with a tiny fraction of my income. I actually get to live like a normal human being. In the US, you have to either be born rich, or be lucky enough to have a job that pays over $150,000, in order to enjoy these simple comforts. Here, you don't have to be special. You can just work an entry-level job and have all your needs met automatically. Norway on top. I've been thinking about your country because you are on top of a lot of good statistics. If I were more adventurous I might try my luck there, but not knowing your language would be a problem. What's your economy base on? Here in the US, it seems to me that we're human doings, not human beings. What do you do for a living? What did you do for a living? If someone asks me to tell them about myself, I'll likely start with what type of work I do. Coping with capitalism FTW. In the USA, unless you're born into generational wealth, chances are you're just cattle doing work for the man. Just barely staying afloat. The overwhelmingly majority of Americans have no capital aside from their own physical labor, and since you need a place to sleep and something to eat, you have to sell your physical labor to someone else in order to afford that. Just to survive. Get a better job. I don't have to hear that here. I work an entry-level nursing job here and earn way more than I actually need. As opposed to in the US, where over half my paycheck went to rent alone. I own a house here and still have enough money to throw around for fun if I wanted to. The US is a shithole. It's nice having McDonald's and iPhones, but honestly every other country has those exact things but we don't price gouge the fuck out of them lol. Europe is the same really. Was born there and living there for 39 years. But this not really the issue here. The issue is not what the average person will think but the recruiter. And they all dislike hole in a resume. And actually it is easier to get a job in the US because employer know they can fire you. Interview in Europe where it is hard to fire people because employers can't take the risk. If you lie about your CV in US and you end up performing badly, that's no issue. You get fired. In Europe, they have to keep you. Love your floating saunas is the Oslo harbor. If we did that in the US, there would be sickness, death, lawsuits and taxes. Imagine being US military. Same judgment concept but 10x worse. Being held off on promotion because the guy next to you can run 30 seconds faster than you can. Even though all of your credentials and experience are the exact same. True story. It would take 20 years to get 4 weeks off at the US railroad jobs. Damn, Norway knows how to respect an employee. How'd I move there? Lol, sounds amazing. I hate you. Okay, I don't really care. I live happily. Do you live happily? Or are you just always miserable? You might want to consider relocating to up here in Europe. Smiley face. Greater than I moved to Europe and people judge you based on how you treat them, not your net worth or annual income. Yep, that's what it looks like when there's little social mobility. I own a house and 2 cars, a boat, and plenty of recreation equipment. None of which I'd ever be able to afford in the US unless I got lucky enough to get a well-paying job. Here, I do a basic entry-level nursing job and I can afford everything I've ever wanted to do. That's social mobility, getting the fuck out of the United States. Do you think you're normal? As far as compared to my peers here? Yes. We're all pretty average, but can afford the basic necessities like a roof over our heads, healthcare, dental, etc. And then some extra for whatever our individual hobbies are. It's mind-boggling to Americans, I know. Because usually to afford this kind of lifestyle in the US you have to earn over $100,000 a year. I'm not even that rich. Life is just affordable here, and isn't held for ransom like it is in the US. Smiley face. Great, but WTF does your commercial comment for Europe have to do with this post? They're not responding to the post. They're responding to another comment. It's the comment that has something to do with it. I'm like, what? I can see you've already had your question answered. But, come here to Europe and understand how much better life is. It's like taking a breath of fresh air. You don't have to spend $2,800 mo to live under a rock over here, unlike the US. You can actually live and pursue your dreams and hobbies here like a normal person, instead of being a classist slave working to make your US CEOs richer. Less than 3. I'm happy to hear you have a beautiful life in Europe, but many of us have the same kind of life here in America. I know I do. Yeah, if you're either privileged or rich. Neither of which I was granted when I lived in the US. It was a constant rat race just to afford the basic necessities. Fuck America. I work a generic job here and can afford way more luxuries than I ever could in the capitalist hell of the United States. So when you say, many of us have the same kind of life here in America, just know I'm laughing in your face. The irony is, if an American conversation did begin with hobbies and travel, you would immediately be judged on that as well. Why aren't you working more? You spend too much time pursuing hobbies and recreation. You must live to serve. USA. Man, I wish we had that in the USA instead of all this greed and lack of benefits that companies do to employees. The US is a shithole. Move to Europe. You have the exact same amenities in most places. If you own firearms, there are countries like here that allow you to keep them, if registered and stored properly. There's really no reason to stay in the US, it's a circus there. Comical even. It's funny looking at the US from over here, and seeing how shit it is back there. Corporations making record profits, while regular citizens are left to foot the bill. I'm so glad to not be part of it anymore, and I'm lucky. I'll have to save up money and do some research before moving to EU. Not going to lose my US citizenship because it's hard as hell to get back into the USA, not to mention a lot of people migrate to the USA because they view it as the savior country of the world. Dual citizenship is what I'm looking for. Norway and the US permit dual citizenship. You just need 3 years residency working here before you can apply. I'm halfway there. Once you leave the US you won't want to go back. Except for maybe visiting family. There really isn't anything I miss personally, or that I can't get here. The United States reminds me of Pleasure Island from the cartoon Pinocchio. On the surface it looks tempting and promising, but dig a little deeper and it's a horrifying degenerate place of hedonism, greed, and overindulgence. Thanks for the info. Asking what's our job is not so much a culture thing emo. Some PPL their job is their life or their major, only accomplishment, which isn't bad from the perspective of just having one, financially speaking. Anyway, work-life balance here is shitty across the board, which contributes. It is in the US. You will get much better results if you tell someone you're a doctor versus being a DoorDasher. You will be treated differently. In the US, most strangers will treat you based on your status. The US is a classist society. Over here in Norway, we all treat each other with mutual respect regardless of professional occupation. Makes sense. What you describe about asking what people do for a living is indeed often about making a quick judgment, and it is wrong. But I always want to ask that question because I'm genuinely interested in what people do. Mind you, I want to know what they care about most, so I don't say, "Where do you work?" but, "What do you do?" But yeah, lots of people do not like this line of questioning. For me, it comes out of collaborative arts. The focus of my 20s, I always wanted to know everybody's project. T.S. What you do for a living definitely affects how people treat you in the USA. If you're a doctor, people will treat you with respect and listen to you. If you work as a fry cook at McDonald's, chances are you're not going to be listened to. Nice to know you actually appreciate human beings, however in reality and the grand scheme, people will disregard you unless you are worth more than them. It's just the way things are in the US. Over here people are much more forgiving and interested in who you are as a person. It's happening in Australia right now too. There are some applications that ask for a reference from your current employer, which was a problem because I wasn't working at the time. I hate when jobs ask for references, not like they actually check. But it's like, I don't call my coworkers. I don't text my boss. I just show up to work and do my job. Then I leave for a better paying job. I don't really keep a list of phone numbers of bosses I worked for. Really, all jobs should care about is where I worked and for how long. The onus should be on them to do their own investigation if they really care about my work performance. I'm currently working, and if asked randomly, I would have no idea or source for the phone number of my previous employer. I have a new phone too, so pretty much my entire contact list is erased. My family is from an Asian culture where, "What's your job?" is more of a status marker where people begin to silently judge you. The Americans who've asked me that in comparison seem genuinely curious, at least online. That seems to be small talk all over the world. I feel like the European tendency to generalize small talk and the, "How are yous, what do you do's?" are kind of narrow considering multiple cultures do it. That being said, there's a lot of unsaid status markers in Europe too. Some have said it already that clothing, accent, and even your hobbies could mark it, so I won't reiterate. I would also question those surveys that try to quantify happiness because how can one really measure that? Isn't it a bit biased that cultures where it's hard to make friends and people cite feeling alienated in adulthood, cause Nordic alienation is a thing, are higher up on the metric, as opposed to ones where people feel more connected to their communities? I feel they tend to measure quality of life, but how does one define happiness? The vacations and off-time thing is also largely confined to most of the first world. But I don't think the world outside of Europe is particularly miserable, even if there are countries where income is lower, more people are economically strained. They may not travel a lot but have their friends and family, communities, and a sense of connection. It's just Europeans from countries that provide such an affluent style of life tend to be insulated from the wider conditions, coming from someone who has had friends all over, mainly places like the UK, Germany and the Netherlands, etc. You guys have good people too and things I envy enough to desire to move there, don't get me wrong. But complaining about someone else not getting a luxury is such a weird display of wealth and status in itself. Travel ultimately is a luxury. I think there's sort of a class marker aspect to that, because showing travels has always been akin to saying, "I can afford this extravagant trip and it's a pity you can't." Personally, I think a massive issue of US culture at least is that we do travel, And we take out unnecessary debts to do so, just to flaunt on social medias in a bragging, comparison, FOMO sort of culture. Which, yes, we are very flawed too. Going into debt for valuing displays and appearances is problematic. I just won't act like that behavior doesn't exist elsewhere. Ultimately, however, I question why people would want to expend on a fun experience, a luxury, or something for photos when that money could be used to help friends and family. I suppose I never understood how it's supposed to make another more worldly and cultured. American or European. The focus should always be on others getting a baseline before some get a luxury. I just imagine if the amount of people who could afford travel used it for something else, the world would be slightly better. This is my take on it, and I do not mean to offend, but just to add. I hear NY general views like this so much, and I just don't see the logic in it, so I think it reasonable to add a different take. Sorry, I signed a non-disclosure agreement and can't divulge the project I was working on, nor the company. Doesn't work. Yes, it does. In a former life, my job was to uncover these people after they had already been hired and working at companies for a while. The normal due diligence companies have a very limited budget and can only dig so deep. Think hours, not days. Deleted. Seeing as that it is a major source of business for each Big Four 2 years after I left, 9 years experience, I'm going to just say you have no idea what you are talking about. Welcome to Reddit. It still works, source. It's literally true for me, but I can say what I was actually doing in the sector, just not the client or anything specific, not even software used, which is extremely relevant in InfoSec. Deleted. I haven't worked there in 2 years. So chill. If you work in the industry, name some of the databases your company uses and how you confirm information that the databases don't have. I don't believe you for a minute given how defensive you are being. Then we can't hire you, goodbye. This doesn't work, because that's not how NDAs work. I interview in a technical field. I'll ask about a gap, but so long as they can explain it, then it's never been an issue. On the other hand, I do look at people with multiple jobs in a short period as a liability. That makes a lot more sense than a gap. Gaps are almost always for reasons outside of someone's control. Whereas working someplace for less than a year 6 times in a row, not so much. I do 1 or 2 years, but if I didn't skip out after 1 or 2, I would have less than 1/3 of my salary. I'd like a pension, regular appropriate raises, and to preserve client and institutional knowledge, but I have to look out for myself and not a random megacorp. Which means I dip and can sometimes double my salary overnight. Went from 35K to 75K in one job hop from MSP to MSSP. But each time I get a new job, I get 5 to 25K added to my salary. Of course I am going to do that, especially since I am very good at documenting myself out of a job. I mean, I work contracts. I was in the exact same position as you several years ago. Now I'm pretty stable, but I will move around a lot. It just happens that I can cover all that under the heading of my own company. Exactly right. Deleted. Probably true for you. I hire mechanical engineers for specific heavy equipment. It takes us over a year to fully train people on our specific machinery. So seeing 3 jobs in a 5 to 6 year period tells me that this guy isn't going to be worth my time to train. My father and I had a general contractor company for about 10 years. Any gaps in my work history I just fill with general contractor self-employed, and it works wonders. This system is rigged against us, no reason not to give yourself a fighting chance. I've been called out on self-employed and told by many recruiters that experience only counts if it's traditional employment and sometimes only if it was full-time. To them, self-employed means unemployed, even with a portfolio. Yeah, I could see how they'd be asses about it. I do my best to avoid recruiters because they are often looking for someone who can match many companies, whereas this strategy works best when dealing direct with the employer because depending on their needs I can bullshit the work I did. It can be brutal. I couldn't find work due to a 5-year gap until my previous manager called me up and offered me a job. Networking is imperative in this job climate. Don't expect to land a job otherwise, at least not one that pays you what you're worth. This whole thing blew up on me and now I am trying to figure out how to help everyone I can. Lol. For most people, yes. But there's also a chance it's a result of someone doing time in prison which they'd obviously want to know about. Which is why background checks exist for employers anyway. True, but not all companies are going to bother with those if they need a candidate quickly. Well, then they can't get upset for hiring a felon who lied on a resume, lol. Yep. Was going to add it's only usually low-quality employers with a revolving door of candidates that ignore background checks. My wife quit working for a couple years to go back to school to get a better opportunity in life. It took forever for her to land a job because the gap in her resume. Like FFS, she went for a tough major and was lucky enough to be in a place where I could keep us afloat while she did it. And she's punished for focusing on school. So dumb. The trick isn't to just say it's a break from work. You have to scope it as something you left work to accomplish. Just say you backpacked the Appalachian Trail or some stupid shit. Absolutely. I used to have breaks all the time for good reasons like school or other personal projects. I've been freelancing for a long time now, so I just say I was working on my portfolio or something. Tell me you've never hired someone without telling me you haven't hired someone. Is it a sole reason not to contact a potential employee? No. Are gaps a reason to have a conversation about? Yes. Yes, they are. Plenty of legit reasons someone might not be able to work. Especially since a lot of people got screwed over by COVID, not to mention recessions and other BS. The norm is to work until you retire, with no gaps. Now back to work, robot. Companies be like, we will only hire you if you're burnt out and haven't taken a vacation in 8 years. Who does not lie anyway? Have you seen what you will be doing section on a job posting and what you end up doing is completely something else after you get hired? Is that not the same? In every job I've had in tech, the job description, interview did not match the job. You never know how it doesn't match. If you throw in recruiters and HR, you've got a stew cooking. I've never lied on my CV. Maybe this is where I'm going wrong. I don't either. Caught plenty of liars, though, but probably only the stupid ones. Makes me wonder about the ones I missed. I think this is my problem also. I don't put anything on there I wouldn't want to be quizzed on. Including programming languages I haven't used in the last 3 years. Which I probably shouldn't do, because even though I haven't used Python in 10 years, I could probably get a web server set up in less than 30 minutes. The lies will catch up with the liars. Just give it time. I used to do this all the time, still would, but nobody's asked in a while. I'm a mitigation contractor, so the options are limited, but the industry works heavily with insurance carriers and is known for its profitability, so I tell people just make up the numbers and make sure you forward me what you tell them. Are you going for sales? Cool, you sold $2 million last year. Project management? Handled high-profile clientele in NYC doing XYZ. I've done work in buildings like 15 Hudson Yards and Trump Tower. I know, but money is money and they actually paid me, so it actually looks pretty great on a resume. Management? You were my GM for years running a team of 30 full-time and contracted positions. However, they want to make it sound as long as it's feasible that a contractor can do it. I see it as if the corporations are going to scheme, then we gotta scheme. It's called common decency, compassion, participating in the community, supporting your friends and family. The way I see it, I'm not gonna blatantly lie for a guy and tell someone he can do all this crap he has no idea about, but if the guy's capable of doing the work, I'm myself a professional with over 20 years of experience in the tech industry, and this is a common practice, at least for as conscious higher humans that want to accelerate humanity. Anywho, my 2 cents. We should have a subreddit for filling resumes. Eyes. As long as it isn't the same company, I will make any of my friends sound like they walk on water. I have a fancy job title, and sometimes depending on the company hiring my title gets fancier. Isn't this disproven with the work number program most companies use now? I would like to be friend with you, tears of joy. Do you have a gap in your work history? Do you want to be a data analyst during that time? Lol. Honestly, yeah. PM me. We can chat. You're so real for this, lol. It's also really sad to have to go these lengths to get a job. MVP. Lol, can I use you as my reference too? Maybe? Lol. Let's talk. I would love to have someone like you in my country. Loopholes are normal now. Process takes up to 3 months. If I get fired today, I will be working probably and hopefully in 3 months. Is normal to give gaps, lol. Somebody needs to write a movie in the same vein as Accepted, except it's a bunch of unemployed people who create a fake company to put on their resumes while they look for jobs. You're awesome cool. I would like to be an intern at your company for my resume. Tears of joy. That's maybe doable. PM me. Can I be the retired founder who taught you everything you know and handed over the reins to go exploring Brazil? Way late, but do you still have more spots to do this kind of thing? I'm also interested just for a potential internship, if that is doable by any chance. Sounds like you've got yourself the potential for a solid business model here. Open mouth smile. I am currently struggling with this. I would be happily previously employed by your company. I work in analytics and just came home after a 1-year sabbatical to look for jobs. I keep getting grilled on my resume gap. Would you be willing to take me too? I would be forever grateful. May I be one of your coworkers, please? Can I be a data analyst too? Smiling face with tear. I'm working on some projects, but I don't have any experience yet, and it's been very hard to put my foot on the door. PM me your LinkedIn and I'm trying to help everyone I can. Med you. Thank you. What kinda company is it? I have a gap and would love a contract work on there. It would be nice if you could help me. Smiling face with tear. Username checks out. I'm sorry for being that invasive, but could I chat with you as well? I'm a beginner developer who can't find a job with my current abilities, but I don't want to lie. Could I contact you? I think I've seen this play out before. https://youtube.be/pdw7spire7lc?C=88fxu8 So I'm sure you're getting swarmed with PMs right now, and maybe this is a stretch, but my husband has a degree in statistics and would love to work as a data analyst. Are you perhaps looking for any real employees to hire? Legend status. Are you full of referees? I have a small data analytics portfolio on GitHub but no work experience, probably hit 1,000 applications this year. Didn't work in 2022. Damn, I'd pay for this lol. Thanks for doing this. I'm currently an analyst, with no gaps, but just posting to say thanks, and maybe keep it in history in case the unthinkable happens. Wait, I might also want to be a data analyst lol. The hero we don't deserve. Thank you. Smiley face. You're so sweet for this. Might as well end a digital hand after all. I am in inside sales converting to analytics. I can get the job done, but no one wants to give me a chance to prove it. Internship is good to polish my resume. I've been bosses and references for former coworkers and/or friends who I've worked with and know what they are capable of, but had circumstances work against them. One coworker who had gotten married and had a family, kids, and was out of the game for 6 or 7 years needed a reco. I wrote one out and vouched that when we worked together she was knowledgeable, detailed and a master at her craft, and she was, probably one of the best PMs I've ever worked with. Praised her and basically said she has probably only gotten better as being a parent is the ultimate project manager position and everything else is trivial in scope. Got hired at Verizon. Had another colleague that I put glowing recos in for that was hired at Reebok and Macy's corporate years ago. Circumstances sometimes need help. Especially now, companies are absolutely shit and might as well try and game people in as it may work in your favor as well. Just don't lie about what you can do, even though Richard Branson sometimes saw whys to do so. Know your limits, stretch the truth, but don't lie. The balance is knowing what you can learn before someone realizes you don't know versus what you cannot. You cannot learn a whole discipline without getting into a bad situation, but you can learn a framework or technology here and there. You are an amazing human being. Deleted. Thank you for this laugh. Tears of joy. Zuckerberg? 7 open mouth smile. You sir are a good friend indeed. You are the real one. Who knew this post was going to blow up? Lol. You're an amazing person. Thank you on behalf of all of us. You are an actual angel. Your friends should be very grateful to you. This is awesome. Butterfly. Legend crown. Same. Good friend. Had a mate that worked in real estate and would be folks' reference for houses. You willing to fill in a hole for a stranger? Grin. My main hurdle reference-wise is doing contract dev work and consultancy here and there with my LLC in between indie dev work for clients in countries where this whole US-style reference thing isn't really a thing. So I end up coming short when it comes to references when applying for jobs. Perhaps one day I'll have a friend like you and I in turn can pass it on by leveraging my company for others like you do. Can we be friends? Lol. PM me. Same here.